How's Mike? Is anybody here named Mike? They asked me in the back to check on him.
Yeah, that's always fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Oak Grove Podcast. This Lenten season, we are recording the podcast with the Oak Grove youth, and we are talking about our spiritual journeys and finding hope along the journey. And this episode, we have a special guest, Cole Jones. Cole, will you tell us who you are and how you got to Oak Grove?
Well, I'm Cole Jones, as CJ mentioned. I go to Lakeside High School. I'm a senior there, about to start UGA in the fall. Go Dogs. I've been at Oak Grove since third grade. My family moved here, and I think they've been members since sixth grade. I was confirmed in ninth grade. And, ever since about sixth grade, I've just sort of dived into the ministries of Oak Grove, youth choir, the different things like that.
That's awesome, man. And so on this episode, we are specifically talking about international missions and serving God and serving the church through international missions. Mm-hmm. This whole Lenten season, we've been looking at different areas in the church life and in the world that youth are serving in. And we've kind of expanded with each episode. So we started with the very first episode talking about local missions. Mm-hmm. Then we went on to serving in the local church in different aspects, finally getting to creation care and inclusivity. And now we're wrapping it up with international missions, kind of the broadest of all the episodes. And you want to tell our listeners why we're recording about international missions and a recent experience that we've just got back from?
Well, the youth just got back from a mission trip to Costa Rica. We did it over spring break. So we left Saturday the 5th.
The 5th, yep.
The 5th. And we got back Friday the 11th, I want to say.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, almost an entire week in Costa Rica helping out the community there. And it was a really good experience and sort of got the youth involved in an international mission trip, which was really cool.
That's awesome. And it was our first international mission trip with the youth group in probably 5 or 6 years on this side of the pandemic for sure. Mm-hmm. So can you tell our listeners why international missions is important or why it's important to you?
Well, it's important to me because it's a way of connecting with communities that you have no clue who they are, how they live, because, we had mentioned, Reese mentioned the Hinton mission trip where we go to North Carolina, and that's in America. You sort of know how they live. Like, you're not in that same community, but you understand the values behind most of their lives. Costa Rica is different. You have so many experiences to learn from the people there. Just the food, as one way, was completely different from American food. So it's just like different ways of getting to connect with the culture and finding new ways to share the love of God. So the pastor there, Pastora Christie, she just sort of opened my eyes on how to better connect with people through the love of God. So those experiences are very important and are why I enjoy international mission trips.
That's awesome. And you mentioned a lot of the difference between our community and the community in Costa Rica. Over the course of the week, though, did you notice any similarities in the community and family that we find ourselves in?
I could say that love is definitely a universal concept. Just like the love that I felt from being welcomed into the community was definitely something that I feel back here in Atlanta. So that was a nice little connection between home and Costa Rica. Just the sense of community that they had felt very much like what I aspire to have in this church, in the broader community around us. And so just the emotions, the interactions that we had felt very similar to home, even if it was entirely new people, different customs that I wasn't used to.
Absolutely. And obviously there's a language barrier. Mm-hmm. But many of our students said that after a few days of playing with the kids and leading the VBSs, that they were beginning to forget the language barrier even exists. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, it was fun. I think it was our first VBS Day Sunday. We had a bit of an extended time. So we did our scripture, then our craft, and then we had a little time to play outside. And I remember while some of the kids were kicking around some soccer balls, just running in the street, we had a few kids sit down with some of the youth and just teach them some Spanish, just a little mini Spanish-English lesson that was going on in the side of the street. And it was really fun to see the kids just try their best to break down that language barrier on even the first day that we were there, just sharing, oh, this is what this word means. And then one of our youth would share what it means in English. And it was just a good way to start that transition from English and Spanish to sort of just combining and just sharing in the experience together.
That's awesome. And so when we're talking about international missions, I'll be the first to admit that I can be very critical of international missions, right? We don't want to make communities in other countries dependent on the United States. We don't want to make it look like we're trying to colonize them or just make them American Christians instead of being their authentic Costa Rican selves worshiping Jesus. And there's a lot of critique about, like, we just go into communities and spend a lot of American money and do things that could have been Costa Rican jobs. And those are valid critiques. However, I do think the relationships that we built there and the expanded worldview that we're returning with is something that is helpful for our own faith and hopefully the faith of the folks in Costa Rica. Can you speak to those relationships and how they've impacted your life?
Well, I would definitely say an international mission trip like the Costa Rica mission trip definitely builds community, not just with the people that we serve, but also with our group. When people watching the podcast might know about our bit of trouble on Saturday, trying to get flights. And while it was a pain,
Cole, if I can interrupt you here, for folks that don't know about the struggle on Saturday, do you want to share with them a little bit about that?
So Saturday, I woke up around 2:30 in the morning.
Yep.
Had to be at the church, I want to say around 3:30. And so we get to the airport. The line is 2.5 hours, maybe even more, trying to get to the desk. So we do not make the first flight. I think that one was, at 6:30?
Yeah, thereabouts.
And so we try and get another flight. And we come to the gate 5 minutes before boarding, and they don't let all of us on. So we got, 5, 6 people?
Yep. Stuck in Atlanta.
Yeah. And so that was a harrowing experience. But it also, I feel like, was the first step to going us closer, because we all now had that experience.
Absolutely. So, and honestly, that was the worst of the trip. It's funny. One of our students who, after the first flight got delayed, looks at me and says, "Oh, well, things can only go up from here." And then, of course, we missed the second flight. In terms of international missions, is there a theological reason for international mission trips? What's spiritual about it? Do you have any scriptures that you can point to?
Well, my family was Baptist. That's where we came from before the Methodist Church, and they love missions. So I've had that hammered into me since I was a little baby toddler. So they like to use, and I feel like everybody who does missions talks about in Acts when Jesus sends out the disciples, says, go share my love, go make disciples of Christ. So that's always a good one to, as a jumping off point. We have been called to share the love of Christ with everybody around the world. But I tend to gravitate more towards, I think it's Matthew 22, 36 through 40. Those are some of my favorite verses, just where Jesus talks about the most important commandments: to love your God and to love your neighbor. And what is loving your neighbor if not going to them, interacting with them, and then sharing the love of God through that? So it's just, international mission trips are a great way to connect with the community, to show them that you love them, that God loves them.
Absolutely. That's awesome, man. And shout out to North Georgia Conference disaster relief specialist Scott Parrish. But I've talked with him a lot over the years about missions and the importance of missions. And one quote that he always goes back to is, the purpose of missions isn't to necessarily just go into a community and do for this community, but it's to go into the community, see how God is at work in that community, see how people in that community are following Jesus, and take what you can so that way when you return to your own community, you're a better follower of Jesus because of it. Would you say that because of this trip, your strength in following Jesus and your relationship with God is stronger?
I would definitely say so, yes. Pastora Christie was just a great example, just a beacon of what we should aspire to be. She was just so full of love, full of hope, full of faith, and that sort of inspired me in my own faith journey. She talked a lot about the different struggles that she'd had in her life, but they never stopped her from wanting to help out her community, wanting to share the love of God. And that just felt inspiring to me, that no matter what my struggles in life may be or have been, I can still find that connection with God, still find a way to share that love with those around me.
Do you remember the name of the community that we were serving with?
I think it was Mana.
Yeah, it was Asociación Maná, which is like the bread of heaven in the Old Testament that God provided for the Israelites. And it was about 2 hours north of the airport, and it was in the city of La Virgen, which looks like virgin if it's spelled out to our English-speaking eyes. But she talked about how, like, 15 years ago, they didn't have paved roads, they didn't have electricity and running water, and in large part due to her faith and her community building efforts, they've come a long way, and families are blossoming in the community. It was such a beautiful sight to see all the kids just playing in the streets with one another. But it's also a community of deep faith and faith amidst struggles, right? We talked to a lot of single mothers or a lot of folks who their husbands had to go into the city like 2 or 3 hours away and would stay there for weeks at a time to work and then come back. And they would do that day in and day out, only really being home for the weekend. And in fact, Pastor Christie's husband had to leave early Monday morning. So we only got to spend time with him for about 12 hours to go into work. But it was really, really neat to witness the faith in Costa Rica. So what are some of the things that we did while we were down there?
Well, as I've mentioned before, we had VBS. So that was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so it was 4 different sessions. The youth led it in 4 different groups. And it was just not your standard Oak Grove VBS, because we go a bit out, we have the entire day to work with. But we had a scripture lesson, 1 or 2 crafts, and then normally a game that connected with the scripture. So I think we had like Jesus and the bread and fish, the story of Esther, Noah's Ark, and then
casting your nets to the other side.
Casting the nets, yes. And so that was a great way that we connected with the community. Just, I think it was like 2 to 3 hours per day, just a little VBS lesson. We also had our construction projects. So the main one we did was painting the buildings. So they had 2 buildings that we stayed in, the church and then the kitchen next to it. So we painted the inside and outside of the church, of the kitchen, and then the partial outside of the church. Yeah.
And the windows.
The windows. Yeah. The windows took a while, the wrought iron, but it was worth it to just see, how far we'd come, how much work that we could accomplish. Seeing the finished product was very, very rewarding.
Absolutely. And we also did some food distribution while we were down there. Yes. Do you want to share about that?
Yeah. I get to help with the food distribution one day. We did 3 days of food distribution, and we had gone to the supermarket on Sunday to buy supplies, and then we packed it all, sort of like blessing bags on steroids, I would say.
Yeah.
Something akin to that. So just, we had giant bags, and we would go to the community. So I think the first day they went to a few neighborhoods and just went to the homes. They would sit and talk. The thing was, you don't immediately offer the food. You offer connection. You offer a chance to just talk about their day, their family. So we learned a lot about people's kids, spouses, the different things in their life. And then, so you do an introduction, you talk with them, and then you offer any prayer requests that they may have. So to pray for their health, the health of their children, family, and then you offer the bag. So it's sort of not, we're just here for the food. Here's some food. Hope your family does okay. But it was more the connection on top of helping them out with the food. So I felt that was really valuable. So that first day, like I said, they went to the homes. The second day we went to a community center. So had people from the community come in. So that was the day that I got to participate in. So we were just standing around in circles, just talking with different people, just learning more about them. And then the third day, they actually came to the church. So we got to sit around in a circle and talk with them that way. And that was a really rewarding experience, just to hear all of the stories from people who weren't even necessarily part of the church. Just Pastora Christie felt they needed some help and felt that this was a good way to lead them into the love of God.
Absolutely. And it was really cool to see Pastora Christie's version of connectionalism, even though she's not, it wasn't a Methodist church that we were serving with, but she knew of another pastor, another female pastor in a few communities over that was getting a church off the ground. And so one of the days of food distribution, we took about 10 of the bags that we had assembled and drove 20 minutes or so away with Pastora Christie to distribute bags for the pastor and alongside the pastor and the other communities. So I thought that was really neat to see churches supporting churches in Costa Rica. And we just got to be there along for the ride.
Yeah.
So say people are listening to this podcast and they're like, wow, what an incredible experience. I wish that I had gone to Costa Rica, or I wanted to serve on an international mission trip. Do you have any advice for folks about how they could get involved?
Well, if they're a youth, I know you're hoping to re-up the Costa Rica mission trip, hopefully every year. So that'd be a great way. I mean, it's never too early to talk to CJ about getting involved in the Costa Rica mission trip. So, that's a great way. Non-youth, we have the Honduras mission trip, which just came back, I want to say a month ago.
Yeah.
A little bit more. And so that's a great way, if you're a little bit older than youth, but still want to connect with the international community, the Honduras mission trip, they go every year, right?
They do.
So that's a great way every year.
So right now, those were the two that we took this year. I would definitely recommend talking to Pastor Melissa about any other international mission trips that might be on the horizon. And it's really all about relationship, right? Yeah. I told our group at the beginning that it would be a shame if this is the only time that we ever get to meet these people, get to serve with the folks that we're meeting, because that is the epitome of, hey, we're just going to go do this once, have this experience, and never talk to these people again, forget their names, and leave them in the dust. Hopefully, by going back every year, we build something that is a little bit more sustainable than that traditional, we're just going to go have this experience, and maybe we'll be back one day. So yeah, already planning Costa Rica 2026, and I hope that all of you are a part of it.
Yeah.
So this podcast, we've been talking about hope and what it means to find hope for the journey. We talk about our spiritual journeys, and sometimes our spiritual journeys get hard. And I think I said in one of the earlier episodes that for me, hope is what helps me take the next step in that journey. Hope that the next step's going to be better. Hope that the world tomorrow will be better than the world today. How does international missions, how does serving in Costa Rica, or did serving in Costa Rica, give you hope for your own spiritual journey?
Well, as I had mentioned before, Pastora Christie just was this beacon of hope, because she just showed how through all of everything that life had thrown at her, it's still possible to have hope, have just hope for the future, to share in God's love and have faith that things are going to get better. And if they don't, then you need to do something to make them better. So like she went to the president of Costa Rica and said, we don't have any roads. Let's do something about it. And so that just inspired me, because I always believe in the fact that, if something isn't better, you have to strive to make it better. Just sitting around and saying, I wish this was better, doesn't really change anything. So the hope of knowing that you can make it better, that even being a youth, you can't just sit around and be like, well, I'm a youth, I can't do anything. You can do more. The kids there were just a great example of just joy. I'd say no other words to explain like the just feeling that those kids had when they were just like running around. And that gave me hope for the future, that there is still joy out there in the world, and we can just like go and find it and have it lift our spirits and just give us more hope for the future.
Absolutely. And what would your hope be for the relationship that the youth group has with this church down in Costa Rica?
I would hope that it doesn't stop. I won't be in youth next year, so unfortunately I probably won't be able to go. But I hope that more youth will step up, take my place, take the place of other seniors who might leave in the next few years, and just keep going, keep building those relationships. You know, I'd love to see this when I come back from college, from like young adulthood, just coming back to the church and being like, oh, the Costa Rica mission trip is still going. I remember when I did that back in my senior year. And that would just be a great thing to just know that those connections have been continued throughout so many years.
Absolutely. I was thinking to myself how cool it would be if we get to grow up in a sense with the kids that we were playing in the street with, right? Like, what would it be like to see Joshua not just last week, but next year and the year after and the year after, and Yality and Brittany and all of these new friends that we've made. So I think it'd be really, really cool. Well, Cole, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Friends, I hope that you've been touched by the podcast that we've been offering during this Lenten season, as this is the last one. And I hope that has motivated you to serve alongside the youth. We've been talking a lot about how the youth have been being the church here and now. When so often, I think youth are told that they're the future. I hope this podcast has highlighted that these students are the church of today. And I hope that you will accept an invitation to serve alongside them and be the church with them. A few reminders as we're going into Holy Week, or as we are in Holy Week, rather. This Thursday at 5:30 to 7:30, we have our Maundy Thursday meal. That'll be in the fellowship hall. If you have registered for it, then you'll be guaranteed dinner. So we hope to see you there. Friday at 7 o'clock, we have our Good Friday Tenebrae service in the sanctuary. And then on Easter, we have 4 services, starting at 7 a.m. in the garden with sunrise, and then 8:30 and 11 o'clock traditional, and 10:45 modern. Friends, we hope to see you this week during all of these Holy Week festivities, and especially celebrating the resurrected Christ on Sunday. Thank you for joining us, and y'all take care.
Bye.